BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Black Box Ned 88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Welcome to our discussion on the murder of Sharon Tate. This one is going out on the 8th of August, 2020. And we are seeing the 51st anniversary of the last day in the life of Sharon Tate. And this is a pure anniversary upload talking about Sharon Tate and remembering her, as well as the other victims that were involved with the murders on Cielo Drive: Abigail Folger, Wojtek Frykowski, Stephen Parent, and of course Jay Sebring. So the big thing to say is we will be talking about Sharon Tate in a memorial sense, but we will also be mentioning some of the events that happened leading up to her death, as well of course, the perpetrators involved. And we can say that the convicted perpetrators in this one would definitely be Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian was a witness for the prosecution. Linda Kasabian, as a member of the Manson family, was mostly used as the lookout/getaway driver. And what we want to say about this particular incident is that Sharon Tate was somebody whom they said was an actress. She married Roman Polanski. She was 8.5 months pregnant. And they were like, she wanted out of the partying. She wanted out of the Hollywood lifestyle for a time. What she really wanted was a family. And not only does that come from her biographer, but also the people in her life. And the murder of Sharon Tate is something that really captivates us. This is one that really pulls us in. A lot of people have been asking questions that if it had not been for the actress Sharon Tate at the house on Cielo Drive, would we even be talking about Charles Manson? I'm sure that we would, to answer that question, because it's almost like Manson was waiting for the internet to happen to reshape his message and to share all of his weird sound bites. Charles Manson's epic question, Charles Manson's epic answer. It's almost as if the internet just feeds off of people like Charles Manson that can be redistributed in a new way. So the first thing that we should say is that Sharon Tate not only lost her life, but at being 8.5 months pregnant, her unborn baby was also taken from the earth way too soon. And a lot of people really pay attention to the detail that Sharon Tate was stabbed 16 times, but the baby was not stabbed. Some people look into that and find some significance, and other people do not. And there is one thing that we should say. I mean, many of the other victims were ravaged in a much more heinous way. I believe that Wojtek Frykowski was stabbed over 50 times. So, I mean, there could also be something there. And like when we look at these incidents, like, as we said, someone being stabbed more than 50 times, some of the other victims stabbed over 40 times. Many people look at that and they say, that looks like a revenge killing, like somebody who came there, knew who these people were, they knew what was going on, and they wanted revenge. But I've also been going through some of the interviews with members of the Manson family, such as Tex Watson and Leslie Van Houten, Patricia Krenwinkel, and of course Susan Atkins, watching some of the interviews from the ex-Manson family members, and all of them are pretty much singing the same song. They're all saying the same story. They're saying that they were high on drugs when they committed these murders. Leslie Van Houten, of course, would be the La Bianca murders the following evening, but they're saying that they were high on drugs, and Tex Watson is very clear about it. They were taking speed, so that was the reason why some of the murders were involving such ferocity, so many stab wounds in a lot of these murders, because they were just very high on drugs. But if you actually listen to the interviews with these people that I just mentioned, Atkins and Tex Watson and Leslie Van Houten, the biggest commonality is they're blaming the drugs. They aren't blaming themselves. And it's not my own pure observation. A lot of people have pointed this out. They might blame Charles Manson, but mostly they blame the drugs. Oh, well, I was high on LSD for a very long time, therefore I am no longer responsible. You really see that they aren't taking 100% responsibility for the murder of Sharon Tate and everyone else at Cielo Drive. So I would say that even Susan Atkins, especially, she even looks in the camera to kind of make sure that her personality is in the right mode. Very, very fake individual. A lot of people think that Susan Atkins might be a pure sociopath. But what we can say about her is that, number one, I totally don't see the sexy Sadie image that people are talking about, because with Susan Atkins, I mean, it seems like very clearly she has a case of orolabial herpes, and they do say that she wasn't wearing makeup for the trial, but still, I don't know what anybody saw in her, not to mention she is just horribly non-charismatic. But what we said about, being a sociopath, I think we could talk for an hour straight about the psychological profile of Susan Atkins. There's definitely some type of failure amongst her and her father in some type of dynamic, or the lack of a strong father figure in her life, not only getting attached to Charles Manson, but also all of the illegal activities that she was doing, whether we don't necessarily know the full extent of Susan Atkins' role in things like sex crimes, perhaps doing illegal pornographic videos and such. A lot of those exist in rumors, but it definitely seems like she came from somewhat of a broken background. But to talk about some other things about the murder of Sharon Tate, I would actually like to hear from Charles Manson in his own words. We're going to play a clip here, and this is from the documentary Cease to Exist. What I would say about this one is you can hear it on YouTube for yourself. The whole documentary is up there. They cut it up into 10 parts. The clip that we're going to play is from part number 9. And with this documentary, it's excellent. I had a great time watching it. I think that it's presented in a very engaging and insightful way. Once again, Cease to Exist, named after a song that Charles Manson had written. But the thing is, the audio quality really isn't the best for the documentary, so you might hear that when we're listening to the clip. When I find videos like that on YouTube that don't have the best audio quality, I really turn the volume down. And with this one, I turn the closed captions on if anyone likes to do that as well. Anyway, so let's just listen to Charles Manson talk about why Sharon Tate was murdered.
Go on, so you could hear.
Let me explain. Lino Bianca was killed for a black phone book with all the numbers in it. The phone numbers that controlled the music market. Sharon Tate and those people were killed because Terry Melcher broke a contract and sent 3 Orientals with hatchets over to kill somebody else. In other words, you raise man up in the music, and everybody wants to say, hey, well, mine is better than his. And what are you doing up on my stage? And who controls what on this set? When you see Sharon Tate's body laying there all naked, murdered, dead, do you think I had something to do with that? That was the altar. It had nothing to do with me.
Oh, wait, so I can't let you get away with that shit. Terry Melcher was supposed to do some things with music he didn't do. So? Terry Melcher lived in that house. So? Nobody knew Sharon Tate lived in that house. So killing Terry Melcher was okay? No. He broke his word, man. When you went looking for him? I didn't go looking for anyone. No. See, there again, you don't understand it. Let me lace it up your head again, man. Because when I fell out of this penitentiary and I was playing my music, you, Neil Diamond, Buffalo Springfield, Beach Boys, all them guys came to me, you dig, and you said, how can you play this kind of music, man? We've never heard this kind of music before. You know, he said, wow, this is strange kind of music, you know? And I said, oh. And they copied and stole from me and took it down and put it in whatever they did, you dig?
Okay, and that was Charles Manson, once again, from the documentary Cease to Exist. Those were clips from 3 different interviews, and the documentary arranged it that way. They played these 3 different interview clips right together in a row, where Charles Manson is talking about the motivation for the murder. I hope the thing at the beginning was clear where he says that Lino LaBianca, which is, of course, going to happen the following evening, Lino LaBianca was murdered because he had a black phone book that had the numbers of people from the music business, like a black book of influential people in the music business, and that's what they were after for that particular murder. But with Sharon Tate, he says very clearly that he did not know she was there. He was about sending this message to Terry Melcher. If you look at the depictions of the Manson family, the murder of Sharon Tate, you will find that they really like to show that there was a face-to-face encounter between Sharon Tate and Charles Manson. They never state that he knew her specifically, but we talk about this with the film Helter Skelter from 2004, as well as the 2018 film Charlie Says. Both of these films depict Charles Manson, and they're getting this from Bugliosi, goes to the house on Cielo Drive, asking about Terry Melcher. In the 2004 film Helter Skelter, Wojtek Frykowski opens the door and he's having this conversation with Charles Manson, and Manson is dancing around being really silly until he sees Sharon Tate. And then in the film Charlie Says from 2018, they portrayed the scene in a different way where, very simply, Sharon Tate just answers the door and Charles Manson is so awestruck. They really wanted to magnify that particular instance where Charles Manson is just so awestruck and captivated by Sharon Tate's beauty that he just became obsessed with her, and one of those "if I cannot have you, no one will" type of things. But you heard Charles Manson very clearly in the interview clip. He said that he did not know that Sharon Tate was going to be there, and you'll always hear Charles Manson deflect and reshape his ideas and say that I didn't tell anybody to murder anyone, and a lot of people theorized that the way that Charles Manson functioned was that he would tell his followers, if you love me, you'll do this, or something like that. If you love me, you'll take care of this problem. And they say very clearly that they knew what they were supposed to do and they knew how to go about it. And we've talked about this one before on the channel where we read off something about when he says 3 Orientals with hatchets. What that is talking about is Terry Melcher. So one version of the story says Terry Melcher sent a mobile recording studio to the Spawn Ranch for Charles Manson to record his music. And of course, they started doing some drugs with 3 people who came to bring the mobile recording studio, the 3 people that Melcher had sent. And if, the way that Charles Manson describes them is blonde-haired, blue-eyed Orientals. They look like blonde-haired, blue-eyed Orientals. And when we did the discussion on it the first time, I left out the word Oriental. I didn't even want to say it out loud, but I just said blonde-haired, blue-eyed. But what he says was blonde-haired, blue-eyed Orientals came to the ranch. One of them had a really bad trip on the drugs. He had a very adverse reaction. And as Charlie says, picked up a hatchet, and he came after Charlie, saying Charlie is the devil, his music is the devil, and that Manson wanted to retaliate for that incident, and that Bruce Davis and one of the other members of the Manson family had to subdue this individual who was wielding a hatchet. Although I swear at one time I read that he picked up a pitchfork and that he did that. But Charles Manson, I guess he was there. He says that it was a hatchet. You're going to hear a lot of different things about the murder of Sharon Tate, as well as the events that happened with the Manson family. But I would like to pay attention to a very particular detail, because Charles Manson says one thing that he is very adamant about. He's like, I do not lie. That is what he said many times. He's like, I've never lied to anyone. He did not lie to the press. And I think that it's from his first interview that he did on TV. I think so. I'm pretty sure it's from like around the early 80s or something, the first interview that he did from jail. Maybe it's one of the later ones, but the interviewer is asking him, did you murder Shorty Shea? And he says, hell no. Then he asks him, did you cut off Gary Hinman's ear? And he says, hell yes, I did. It's like he does admit to things, and sometimes he does give direct answers. Of course, talking about the murder of Gary Hinman, where Charles Manson allegedly struck Gary Hinman in the ear with a Confederate sword, and then later on, Bobby Beausoleil would have committed the murder, and so on, as well as some other accomplices, of course. I mean, that's the thing about, it seems like all the Manson family activities, they were working together. You're never necessarily knowing who did what. All the stories are alleged. But, and just to say one more thing about that, there's a very good reason for that. Like, I was reading an article from the Washington Post that was talking about this and saying that it was even possibly Charles Manson's own direction. Murder everybody, leave no witnesses alive. And on the Opperman report, they described it as a blackout. It's called a blackout when everybody is murdered, so there are no witnesses left to tell anybody the story. But you heard Charles Manson, in his own words, talking about the motive for the murder of Sharon Tate. Number one, saying that he did not know that she was going to be there on that particular evening. And number two, saying that it was about people in the music industry were ripping off his material or not taking credit for his material. People heard him and they said that he had a really good sound, and he perhaps met other people, not only Terry Melcher, but other people, other bands, and they were using his stuff, or they were using some of his music as guidance. And then he retaliated in a very, very destructive way by getting his followers to do that. And that's a big thing that people do say about Charles Manson, is that he hatched this plan that really doesn't seem to be too clever, wherein he wanted to have his followers commit the murders just so he could say, I've never killed anybody. I killed a chicken once. I'm only sorry for the Indians. And then he can just keep on talking in circles. But in reality, he was if probably not a mastermind, but the driving force behind some of this. When it comes to the alternative theories associated with the murder of Sharon Tate, I would first like to begin with something from Tom O'Neill, because he talks about it was even possible that the murders at Cielo Drive were not even supposed to begin on August 9th, or if you go even back to the previous evening, August 7th, and like on August 7th, I believe it was, when they're at Jay Sebring's house watching a movie and someone cuts the power lines and all the lights get really bright, and the cable is the one that's really cut, but the lights get really bright and then they go dim. And what Tom O'Neill was hypothesizing was that perhaps somebody got scared of the power surge and the bright lights, and then they decided to make a run for it, and they decided not to act on that particular night. But very clearly, the lines were cut on the previous night. So that could mean that someone was trying to go after them at that point, but that wasn't even at Cielo Drive. I believe that was at Jay Sebring's house. And then there's some other alternative theories that go even a little bit deeper. You guys who listen regularly know that I follow the Stones Unturned with Thomas Henry Horan, who first theorized that Sharon Tate was murdered by the serial killer Rodney Alcala, who's known as the dating game killer. But even he backed away from that one a little bit and instead began to promote a theory that Sharon Tate, as well as everybody else, Wojtek Frykowski, Abigail Folger, Jay Sebring, and Stephen Parent, were murdered because of connections to the drug trade, and not just a drug deal gone wrong, or not just this thing where people might be after Charles Manson for a couple bucks, but there are major connections involving the cocaine trade from Boston to Los Angeles, and that Wojtek Frykowski and Jay Sebring are caught up in the coke trade, and then they want to get their cocaine from a mafia gang in Toronto as opposed to Boston, and that was one of the reasons for the retaliation. And Tex Watson was heavily pulled into this. This ties into what a lot of people have said about how Tex Watson could be so much more influential into answering all the questions about these murders, and the set of tapes that he has provided that was locked away in the vault, 20 hours of recordings after the Sharon Tate murders and after he was taken into police custody, talking about the case, might provide all the answers. What we can definitely say is that, I would like to reiterate that one point, that many members of the Manson family really do not take responsibility for this. Instead, they were simply saying that they were caught up with drugs, and that it was Charles Manson, drugs, and Charlie. That's what they're blaming it on. They're playing the blame game as opposed to the acceptance game, simply saying, I was weak, I made a mistake, I did something very wrong, and I can't bring that back, and then going through the process of rehabilitation. But then the other thing to say about that very clearly is when Charles Manson is talking about this, by his own admission, he says that he's giving everything away. He says that he is sharing all the answers. He says this very frequently in his interviews. And what I would just like to ask that as a challenge question. What do you think about what he said? That he didn't think that Sharon Tate was going to be in that house. Nobody knew that she was going to be in that house. And he simply wanted revenge on Terry Melcher for, number one, having other musicians perhaps put out music that he thought was very similar to his, or the incident we mentioned with the hatchet-wielding, blonde-haired, blue-eyed individual. What do you think about that? And then the final thing I would like to say is Charles Manson once referred to, in the video clip, the audio clip that we just played there, Charles Manson said something to the effect of that Sharon Tate was just the altar. And what does he mean by that? I would just like to say, and I don't know if there's anything into this, but when he says the word altar, Charles Manson once said that music was God. He said very clearly, some call it God, some call it Allah, some call it love. For me, it's music. Call it what you want, it's there. So perhaps he viewed that as some sort of sacrifice to the god of music, or that would be a front or a facade for whatever he was trying to justify for his own selfishness. But I don't know if there is any depth into that, but that is definitely something that I noticed, a sacrifice to the god of music, or perhaps a sacrifice to Charlie Manson, who is the messenger of the god of music. I don't know if he genuinely believed that or not, but I noticed that pattern is taking shape. I don't remember which interview I heard that from. That was about 7 or 8 years ago, but I always remember that line. Some call it God, some call it Allah, some call it love. So for me, it's music. Call it what you want. It's there. I'm just quite curious if there's any connection to that. But I think that's where we're going to have to leave it at for now. So 51 years since the final day in the life of Sharon Tate. And once again, I highly recommend the documentary Cease to Exist. There are some other good ones out there. The 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter was another pretty good documentary about the Manson family, as well as the book My Life with Charles Manson by Paul Watkins is available here on YouTube for free in audiobook form. Many good things that are available online to learn more about this situation, as well as the interviews with the Manson family. What do you have to say about this? And I would just like to say rest in peace to Sharon Tate, and another year has gone. All right, if you have anything to say at all, please drop something in the comments section below. If you like this upload, you can hit the like button. It really helps out the channel. And see you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.